Thank you so much for joining me again for part 2 of our meetup. And for those who are watching this is Robin Foy, who is the founder of the Scole Experiment that everybody, I'm sure, has heard about, everyone in the paranormal, that is. And also the website Physical Mediumship for You and the Spiritual Science Foundation. And so how's everything been since we last spoke?
Well, fairly steady. Nothing much really happening over here. We're still in sort of partial lockdown. It's getting easier as time goes on, but nothing much happening on the psychic front at the moment.
Okay. And now just going back to our discussion, these solid apparitions, teleported visitations and so on. With those, who was your most memorable and why?
Well, I think probably the most memorable was actually the ET, our stellar friend Blue, purely and simply because he was one of a kind as far as we were concerned. But he actually placed his photograph on a video that we had running at the time, and he stood in front of us, little fella, about 4 feet, just over 4 feet. 4'6", and allowed us. Well, he actually picked up our hands, placed them on his head to show us that he wasn't human. But the actual photograph that was on the video afterwards, and it was an animated video, so he was moving around on that. He showed basically that he was perhaps what most people would understand as a grey, except that he was totally blue in colour. Right. So we were never sure exactly where he came from, but the interesting thing was that we had probably a week or a couple of weeks beforehand a miniature UFO that materialized in the room, or was teleported into the room, and actually flew around, totally lit inside, a sort of little portholes that were lit up.
Did you say
and paused in front of each of the sitters. Sandra said, at the time, well, that looks like a UFO. And Emily, who was our main guide at that time and helper from the spirit point of view, said, what do you mean it looks like? So Sandra said, well, it looks like a UFO. And Emily said, well, it is a UFO. They've been able to teleport that in, and they're actually taking it round for you to see. And this thing stopped in front of each and every one of the sitters, a few inches in front of our eyes, so we could examine it. And that was quite amazing. And then I think it was probably about a week after or so that we actually had Blue himself teleported into the room. And because of the fact he was quite loving, you could feel the love coming off him as he was standing in front of us, no more than about 6 inches in front of each of us. And he went round so that everybody got a chance to sort of meet him that way. And you could feel the love coming off him. And he was really very, very nice sort of fellow altogether, and people call them aliens, and I absolutely hate that, because aliens to me is a very negative expression, and also in a way it's a bit disrespectful when these fellas come along with love. So we always call them stellar friends. Yeah, we call them stellar friends, and that's exactly what they were. So the interesting thing about that also is that when Scole finished, we'd had on 2 or 3 occasions, Blue had actually been teleported into the room, so he was there quite solid. But when Scole finished, we were devastated in 1998. When we moved over to Spain in 2006, we had a couple who were physical mediums themselves, based in Glasgow, and we hadn't met them, but they phoned us up and they said, can we come and stay with you? We've been getting phenomena that's all done with energy. And we said, yeah, that's not a problem. So they arrived in March of 2007. And during the sittings we had here, much of the phenomena that was produced by them, because they were physical mediums, was very, very similar to the physical phenomena we'd had at Scole. They had independent voice, but each and every one of our guides from Scole, who we really hadn't had a chance to ever speak to again after Scole, all came and spoke in independent voice. And once again, whilst we were here, I think we had 3 sittings in our apartment here in Spain during that week. And then a couple of months later, I think probably in May in 2007, we shared a gîte with these 2 people, the Andersons from Glasgow, and we had 2 more sittings there. So on both of those occasions, Blue came exactly as before, stood in front of us, and put our hands onto his head so we could feel him again. And I mean, it was quite amazing. So he hadn't gone from our life, and we presume that even to this day he's waiting in the background for when we're able to get our phenomena back.
That's fantastic. You mentioned that small UFO. I had actually discussed an experience I had in a video quite a number of years ago. And when I was a child, I can remember that there would be this tiny little UFO, probably as big as the palm of your hand, basically, or your hand. And it would come into my grandmother's, because I used to live at my grandmother's, and it'd come through the door. It actually would go through the door, through the wall, and it would fly around me, and it would lead me outside. Now, I thought I was dreaming, and I followed it outside, and I could see the sky alive. I could see all these things moving around, you know, like planets close up. It was like it was surreal. It was really surreal. It was like everything was lit up, and I could see movement and everything in the dark sky, and yet it was all lit up, and it was amazing. And it was like they were showing me that. And then I actually had this experience where I was somehow in one of these crafts, and I'm looking at what looked like a porthole. And it took me to a grave site. Now, when I was born, my name was Angela, and I never liked it. And I always wanted to change it. And I thought Karen is a strong name. So I went with Karen. And the weird thing is, when I was inside this UFO thing, I thought it was a dream. And it probably was. It probably was how they were connecting with me. But in this dream, I go past what looks like a gravesite. And on this little headstone is my mother's name. And beside her name is Karen. And I thought, who's Karen? You know, I just didn't click, because at that time my name was Angela. So later, when I changed my name, and then when my mother passed, we've got a garden plot, and she has her, you know, remains in there. So she's not buried; she's actually cremated, and her, you know, her ashes are placed and turned in there. And I said that I wanted to be buried with my mother when I die. And they said, and what name will we put down? And I said, Karen. And then it just all came back to me. I thought, this is so, it's like a deja vu. And that's where I've seen that future, but I was apparently deceased by that time.
Right. Yeah. Amazing stuff. Yeah.
It is.
I mean, the interesting thing I was saying about this couple that came and stayed over here with us in Spain, and it must have been probably about a year or a couple of years after that they came back and had a holiday in Spain at a new hotel that was sort of offering special rates for people a little bit further down the coast from us. And we went along and met them down there, and we went out for a meal with them to a Chinese restaurant that was on the coast, just near Murcia. And throughout the whole of that meal, the table, all 4 of us are sitting around the table. Nobody was touching it, but the table was jumping about and acting as though it was alive. And we were sort of giggling away at this, and the Chinese waiters were sort of standing there amazed, watching this happening as the table was moving about all over the place. Wow. And then we went back to their place for a coffee afterwards, and sat on a bar terrace that was sort of outside near a golf place. And on that occasion, we were all sitting around having a coffee, and there was a sort of round table in front of us. And all of a sudden, I saw this UFO, I'm sure it was a UFO, light in the sky, and it sort of shot across the sky and stood almost looking at us from, and it was very dark, but you could see this very brightly. And I said, my gosh, that looks like a UFO. And all immediately the table started hopping around as though it was alive. And we all turned around and we saw this UFO, and it sort of moved around a little bit and then shot off at a fantastic rate of speed into the distance. But that also was sort of tied in with the fact that the ETs and our stellar friends were still around.
Yes.
But we thought that was quite amazing on that occasion. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Now, you've had many experimentations during Scole. Were these ideas that came to you and Sandra or from the spirit team?
No. Virtually everything that as through the development of Scole, and bear in mind that when Scole started in December 1992, and it didn't really get going until 1993. But Sandra and I had loads of different circles. We got married in 1979. We'd had our own circles. We'd been involved in other circles. We were asked to go to circles. I'd started the Noah's Ark Society, which in 1992 was really doing extremely well. I started that in 1990. And the idea was to stop physical mediumship becoming totally extinct, which it could have done in 1990, because all of the good physical mediums were elderly and they were all dying off one by one. And there didn't appear to be anybody else actually developing it, the youngsters and so forth and so on. So we started this Noah's Ark Society, which did the job it was put there to do. I mean, I was given a message, an independent voice from a circle I was sitting in Derbyshire at that time, in Ilkeston, to start this organisation to rescue physical mediumship, which we did, and that was very successful. So we'd had lots and lots of different circles all over the years, and we'd really learnt that anything that you achieve is achieved better if you listen to spirit. So from the very start, when we were able to connect with our guides at Scole, virtually everything we did was at the suggestion of spirit. And they never bullied us. They never said, you must do this or you must do that. They simply said, well, we think this is a good idea. If you could do this, if you could get a dome, and we were the first to do that, of course. But the phenomena that came after we'd got a glass dome was quite amazing. And so they were the people telling us what experiments they could probably achieve good results in. And we followed the spirit team. And they told us, towards the end of the experiment, that the reason we'd got very, very good results over all that time was the fact that we listened to them and we did what they wanted. So I think, in all honesty, the best thing to advise for anybody who has a circle is to listen to the guides and do whatever they're asking.
Quantum theory explained one of the most shocking experiments conducted at Scole.
This particular experiment was perhaps the most important experiment of the whole series.
Previously, we showed how visitors reported seeing these balls of light appear before them.
It's like fireworks!
On this occasion, one of them flew inside a large quartz crystal.
The crystal then levitated, we could see it glowing, and then descended into a Pyrex bowl. Then Arthur Ellison was invited to pick it up. He picked it up and satisfied himself that it was there and it was glowing, and he put it down again. He was asked right away to pick it up again. He tried to, and his fingers closed right over it. It had dematerialized.
There's nothing there, yes, it looks the same, but there's nothing there.
Then he was asked to pick it up again, and it rematerialized in his hand.
Oh, I can feel the crystal now.
Now this dumbfounded him. This is what finally convinced him that this was real, because it couldn't have been faked in any way. And he had his head right over the top of the bowl in order to ensure that no hand or no instrument could interfere with it.
Of course, we were totally amazed by this. Things do not materialize and dematerialize. This is against all the laws of nature. We are trained scientists, of course. We know how the world behaves, and it doesn't behave like that.
When you really think what we're experiencing now, that's amazing. Miracle, yes.
But what does this remarkable demonstration tell us about what might happen after death?
And in the Scole Afterlife series video, there was actually a crystal that dematerialized, then materialized again. Can you actually elaborate on how this was done by spirit and why?
Yes, indeed. I think the reason for it was basically we had visits during our sittings. We had visits from members of the SPR, three elderly gentlemen who were fairly prominent in their field. There was Arthur Ellison, who was he was an electrician. We had Monty Keane and we had David Fontana, and each of them were sitting with us for a period of 2 years. On and off. I think they probably had about 25, 26 sittings altogether. And Arthur Ellison was not totally sure that what he was witnessing, the phenomena, and it was quite amazing, was 100% genuine. So he was really asking spirit mentally if they could do something that would totally get him to realize that what was happening was 100% genuine. So they actually did this experiment to show the three guys that what was happening was genuine. And they during it was dark and there was a crystal on the table, quite a sizable crystal, and this was lit up from within by spirit light. And we were asked to put this into. We had a bowl, Pyrex bowl, on the central table. We were asked to put this into the Pyrex bowl, which we did. And they said, well, we're going to do an experiment here. And they said to each of the investigators in turn, pick up the crystal, hold it for a second, make sure it's solid and it's genuine, and then put it back in the bowl, which they did. When the moment that they sort of put it back into the bowl, it was still visible because it was still lit up from within by this light. So nobody ever lost sight of this crystal. It was lit up throughout the whole experiment. But a second later, after, for instance, Arthur Ellison had put the crystal back in the bowl, and in fairness, he actually had his chin almost on the rim of the bowl to make sure that nobody was cheating. They said to him, pick it up again. And Arthur tried to pick it up, although this had been in view all the time, and his fingers just simply went through it. It was still visible to us, but in fact, it wasn't there as far as everyone was concerned. And so, that's what happened. And so he was quite shocked by this. And then they said, well, sort of wait one moment. And another few seconds later, they said, pick it up again, Arthur. This time he put his hand in and he picked the crystal up, and it was quite solid as it had been previously. So each of the guys that was there at the time tried this same experiment and picked up the crystal, put it back, tried to pick it up again, and their hands went through it. That one incident was the one thing during all the sittings we had at Scole that convinced Arthur Ellison that what they were witnessing was 100% genuine. And it was explained to us afterwards by the spirit team that what was happened is that all they had done was to remove the etheric,
the matter.
They'd removed the matter, the atoms and the molecules, if you like, from there, leaving the spirit essence behind, because everything in life, including us, has a spirit essence. Yeah. In our case, you would call it your soul, perhaps, but it's the spirit essence that's still there once we've passed on to spirit. And so what they'd actually done was to remove the solid and leave the spiritual essence of the crystal there. So it never changed shape, and it never all they'd done is just simply take out the solid matter. This is something that obviously they're able to do on a fairly regular basis, and it shows you exactly.
Would you say that's similar to astral projection?
No. Astral projection is when you're sort of basically asleep or in trance, and you consciously project your spiritual essence, if you like, into a different place, and observe what's going on, and then you bring your observations back with you, and you can relate what you've experienced. This was used a lot by the US military, in that they were training people to do this astral travel in the hope that they could pick up secrets from places like Russia.
Wow. Yes, I actually remember reading something on that, and I thought, I wonder if they actually did that, you know, because sometimes you might want to go to a certain place, but you don't end up there.
But quite a lot of people in America did actually train and were getting very, very good results when they had a target area to go to and were able to pick up some very useful information there.
Now, is there an experiment that those truly sincere about physical mediumship can actually try safely in their own home?
Yeah, anybody that's really serious about physical mediumship should consider either joining or starting a circle of their own. And there is a little booklet called a Basic Guide, which was dictated to us totally by our spirit team at Scole. And that basic guide contains everything that anybody would need to start and run a physical circle in an energy-based way, which is the way that we've had our circles, totally safely, so that there's no problem and they would never get anything unpleasant happen. There's nothing to fear. It's easy to start a circle and to run it.
And can we get this guide online, or is it in one of the books?
It's actually in PDF form at the moment. We were sort of selling it as a printed book at the time, but we never actually had that renewed. So there is a PDF of it, and that simply costs €10, which all goes into the fund for the new foundation.
Great. Well,
anybody that sort of pays that fund will be sent the PDF.
All right. Well, what I'll do is I will take that address from you at the end of this and put that in. So we've got, you know, the description with that if people want to actually purchase a copy. I think it's a wonderful idea, and the fact that it is guiding people the right way. It's not just someone getting together and then, conjuring up something that.
No, I mean, this actually comes from our spirit team, who were extremely spiritual people, and basically it gives you a totally safe way of starting a circle, and of starting to get phenomena and to continuing with it.
What are your thoughts on ectoplasm? We know that many in the past used cheesecloth for dramatization purposes. Have you experienced
it was, I think really the people that used cheesecloth for dramatization purposes were actually cheating. They were fraudulent mediums, and that's something that I am totally against. I know it happened in the past, but where you've got fraud, you had to have something genuine in the beginning to try and copy it. And I've witnessed a lot of ectoplasm over the years. In fact, our early circles were all built and used ectoplasm to get phenomena in those early days. It was really when we got to Scole that everything started to happen using energy. So I've witnessed a lot of ectoplasmic phenomena. Most of the stuff that I witnessed started really at not at Scole, but in the Noah's Ark Society in 1990. We had two mediums that actually developed and started to do public demonstrations for the Noah's Ark Society. Both of those mediums, Colin Fry was the very first, and Stuart Alexander was the second. Both of them were getting their phenomena using ectoplasm, and during the many sittings we had with Stuart and with Colin over the years, we were able to witness ectoplasm. So we got the opportunity to witness ectoplasm on many occasions through that. And to this day, there are still mediums who are getting absolutely wonderful phenomena using ectoplasm. The best in the world, I would hazard to think, is Kai Muga, a German physical medium, who we met for the first time in 2009, but who has really been motivated by the work that we did at Scole. and he started out by getting good energy phenomena in his first circle, but he had a doctor, or well, actually a surgeon who was sitting with him, and the surgeon said he wanted to see ectoplasm. So in his home circle, Kai agreed that he would work with ectoplasm, and from then on his work continued using ectoplasm. So we've sat again many times now with Kai. He's a really good friend. He's almost like a brother. And Kai's ectoplasm is fantastic. He's developed it to the point that now he gets full form materializations with ectoplasm.
Wow.
And you'll find out an awful lot about his experiments, some of which you can actually witness through Facebook.
Wow.
And he has on his site there, he has an awful lot of information and a lot of photographs of his stuff that he's been able to produce over the years.
Fantastic.
But Kai is also the vice president of our foundation. So Kai will be one of the mediums who will be doing regular demonstrations in Antikythera once we get that property. The other people will be the Siegerts, Uwe and Beata Siegert, who are wonderful people getting very good results using energy, but who at the moment, they're also now being allowed to do public demonstrations. They will also be moving over to Antikythera when we get that property, and we'll be doing regular demonstrations. Kai and Beata are the two people who are doing most of the work in the foundation now.
That's real. That's brilliant. Now, angels, I'm sure this is one of your favourite. I've actually had some remarkable encounters, as I've shared with you.
Fantastic.
And believe that you've also had your own. Can you share these with us?
Well, certainly. I mean, the angels was demonstrated on many occasions when we had visitors, as well as when we were on our own. And basically what happened is that these self-luminous figures materialize or sort of grew from nothing really on the central table, and they would start out sort of 1 foot high, but they're self-luminous and looked rather like a Madonna figure with a sort of a cowl and a hood and long flowing robes underneath. But they would grow from 1 foot tall to about 3 feet or sometimes 4 feet tall. And then once they got to their operational height, if you like, they would float around the circle in front of everybody with their robes trailing over our hands. And the love you felt when this happened was absolutely out of this world. It was so fantastic. And they were described to us as angels, and they looked like angels and felt like angels. And they were just so surreal, so fantastic. And we must have witnessed them being present in the room on at least 20 occasions.
Wow, that is awesome. I know my own experiences have been, I've been lost for words in their presence. And that's a lot for me. Just in awe, you know, it's sort of like you want to say something, but you just can't get it out.
Yeah, that's right. Yes,
a really amazing, moving feeling. There was another question I wanted to ask you, which was not on the list of my 32, but reptilians. What is your opinion?
That's not something I've come across in any way, shape, or form. Although, I mean, I do believe that basically that's what we developed from humans, and I do think that the earliest visits we had from other dimensions were certainly from reptilians, and an awful lot of work has been done out in Egypt, especially to try and show that these reptilians were the people who were partly responsible for building the pyramids and for sort of integrating with humanoid people to change us totally. They're certainly from other dimensions, so probably from other planets, but I'm absolutely certain that they are very, very intelligent beings.
Do you think that they're still living among us?
No, I don't.
No. Because I've seen so many of these videos where it's just simple pixelation or you know, a slow internet speed, and it has caused their face to distort and everything. And I mean, I've had that in my own live streams. So it's not anything to do with reptilian, but you know, I just thought I'd ask you because it is a topic that I see a lot, and so many talk about, you know, Justin Bieber's a reptilian, the Prime Minister, you know, the one in charge of America or what have you, he's a reptilian. It seems like everyone's a reptilian because of these.
Well, I think an awful lot of these things you hear are originally based on fact in some way, shape or form. And in my own mind, I would always think in terms of reptilians. I would think of very, very much the earlier visitors to Earth who integrated in some ways with us humanoids, and that's how I see it. Is that basically you're talking about people who live on another planet, and not somebody basically who is, you know, sort of quite different here on Earth. We are all evolving still on Earth. I think things are changing constantly, and I have to say in my own mind also that this world is never going to be the same as it was in February this year. Everything has changed because of the COVID problem that we've got at the moment, and so, you know, this is formulating a change in all sorts of different things in our thinking, in the way that we go about our business, in the way we go about our leisure. So I think our human behaviour is going to change very much because of what we're currently going through.
And also the financial structure is going to be impacted, especially when we go into next year.
Yeah, it's got to be, yes.
Yeah. There's too much money that's just being, you know, spread out there, and it's not, it seems to be helping at the moment, but then there's going to be like so much. I honestly feel we're heading into a depression. I don't feel like we're in a depression yet. I feel that we're
certainly heading into it, and by the end of this year we shall be deep into a depression, which we think is probably the worst in 300 years.
Would you say these experiences have actually developed a strong faith in God, the creator, or something else?
Well, not necessarily in God the creator. I don't see it as though there is one person who is regarded as God the creator, but there is an infinite being, and I'm not sure it's in the form of a person, but there is an infinite force, a creative force, which goes to the center of all creation, and I think you could regard that as a God in a way. And all of us aspire towards that. We all try and improve our spirituality through one or more than one lifetimes, working towards the same sort of level as this creative level. But I don't think that the way that religion has put this as being one person who is God, be it male or female, and there are a lot of arguments about that anyway, You know, I
Well, it's got to
don't
be a
really see it as one
female.
person. But I think we do know as a fact that there is a creative force,
Yes.
which is very, very highly spiritual. And we do feel that in the times of Scole, quite a lot of the very higher beings were actually working with us. And we did get occasions when we were able to speak with these higher beings who really formed it. Well, we had our spirit team, and our spirit team were formed by certain people in the spirit world who were working with us. And above the spirit team, we were told, was a council of communion, which was formed of 13 very, very evolved beings who sit in this. And there are more than one of these council of communions, but each council of communion would probably have several circles, if you like, under their jurisdiction, and they would decide how best to sort of go forwards with the work that a particular circle was doing. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily so that our council of communion, who were above and acted like a board, if you like, a commercial board in a company, they would make ultimate decisions about the spirit team and what the spirit team were doing, etc. But they're not just for us; they would be in charge of other groups as well. Mm-hmm. But in above this one group who were overseeing everything, I think there were even more spiritual characters that we that were there helping us, but mm-hmm. who oversaw several of these councils of communion. So I think in a way, it's all going back towards the one spiritual center, but branches of it sort of go out in different directions, working with different people who are working spiritually and trying to get phenomena and get cooperation and get a closer cooperation between Earth and the spirit world. Mm-hmm. So yeah, sort of I think this all comes down to who is God, what is the creation, but I don't feel it's one person sitting mm-hmm. there and sort of saying, I am God. It's just, sort of
it's an energy.
I think a whole group that are the very center. I don't think that, there's a separate God for Earth and a separate God for for Mercury and a separate God for Saturn. No, I think there is one central organization, a small organization who oversee everything. And so it's not just in one universe, they look after everything in all universes. And I also believe that we have the choice when it comes to reincarnation, to reincarnate on other planets.
Wow. Makes you wonder after this one, do you want to?
Well, exactly.
Now, there was another thing I wanted to ask you, and you sort of like touched on this in the previous video. Now, there are people, as you know, there's always the ones out there who are saying that by getting involved in something like this, you're dealing with the devil, and he's playing tricks with you. Now, you and I have both, had moments where we've not had that kind of experience. It's all been positive. There has only been one occasion I had a bad experience, but that was completely nothing to do with, what my connection with spirit is. And the same with yourself. What would you say to somebody who's watching, who is very skeptical and thinks that it's playing with the devil?
It is totally and simply the fact that people are scared of what the skeptics push around as being the case. Without any evidence whatsoever that is true. Mm-hmm. They always try and make you believe in these things without evidence. Mm. What I've experienced involves evidence, real proof of life.
But that's what I mean. There is some that, I've shown my own evidence and people have said that's a demon, And
I mean, it is a load of old Tommy rot. I'm sorry, but
they're scared of what they don't understand.
That's really, you've hit it on the head. That's it. If they don't understand it, they can be scared of it. but they can then be influenced by people who are so skeptical, even if, you know, sort of it hit them on the nose, they wouldn't recognize it as being genuine.
That's right. And that's the thing. Like that angel that I showed you that appeared through my ceiling.
Yeah.
People were saying, oh, it's a projector. You know, I actually scanned down to show there's nothing there. You know, you can't get a projector to project on something like a ceiling independently like that. You know, it's just amazing. And I was like in awe. I didn't want to stop filming. And that's why I said, here's my hand. I'm not touching anything. You know, it was just mind-blowing because it started off with these tiny little pinholes that appeared in my ceiling. And it was of a night time. And I thought, well, there's nothing up there except the ceiling itself, like the roof. And there's no light in the roof. So where's this light coming from? Though it looked like little pore holes, little porous holes. And then the next day I saw one. And I said, okay, you've got my attention. Can you show yourself more? It got brighter and brighter and moved across the ceiling and started to come down into the form of that angel. And it was moving. It was actually moving. It was absolutely beautiful. And honestly, the colours that it had didn't come through on the actual phone as I was recording it. You know, it was just remarkable.
Wonderful
So moving on. Spirit guides. Have you connected with yours?
Yes, I mean, I would regard the spirit guides that have worked with us most are the ones that work with us at Scole. And we were very, very sad when Scole finished in November 1998, because to us the spirit guides had become so familiar and so loved by us that they were just like our family. So in a way, when Scole finished, it was just like our whole family collapsing around our ears and not having them there anymore. So, you know, we thought that perhaps we would not get the opportunity ever to come across them again. But fortunately, that's not the case, because I mentioned earlier the fact that the two Andersons, Tom and Linda Anderson, had visited us here in 2007. Whilst they were here, and bearing in mind the fact that a lot of their phenomena was very similar to the phenomena we'd had at Scole, each and every one of our spirit guides who'd been with us at Scole spoke to us there at the time, independent voice. And we have been aware of them since in other directions, when I've had sittings with other mediums, when we've sat in other physical circles. We've all the time had an indication that they're still working with us.
That's beautiful.
Not always under the same name, but they are there working with us.
Now, you did mention how or why Scole finished, but can you tell everyone why you decided to finish Scole?
We didn't decide to finish. It was stopped for us by spirit. And we just simply lost connection with our spirit team. And a being who we think was probably what you might term a lord of the cosmos actually came to us for the last two or three sittings that we had and explained fully why it had to finish. In that there was another group in our future who was investigating physical phenomena as we had done, but unfortunately they had made, when spirit had built the portal in which they could come through to us, they expected that the portal would extend beyond our lifeline, so that we would be able to be in touch with people who at that time were probably living in the 2020s, our current time really. And what had happened was that they'd made the portal too large, and instead of having access from people who were living up to 2020, there were people in our future who were living up to 2100 who were trying to contact us every time we sat. and were using something called a crystal probe to work through our crystals to be able to contact us. And that had to be stopped because, as they explained, they had knowledge in 2100 which we didn't have. And if they had contacted us and had told us what was going on in 2100, and we had told the world about that, it could have changed the whole course of history. So we were just not allowed to do that. So they had to close down what we had at Scole. Reluctantly, they did try and put it right, but in the end, they weren't able to do it. And consequently, they had to close us down. So, you know, that was it. And over about 3 sittings, we were totally closed down. Now, in the book, it's got everything at the back of that book on exactly why and how the circle was closed down.
Yeah, I've read that. I'll get you to talk about it.
Yeah. So, you know, that was why it was closed down, and it was just so unfortunate because really, you know, it was the most wonderful thing in our lives, and it just closed off in an instant almost.
It was like taking you, like unplugging the oxygen, so to speak. That kind of.
Yeah, that's more or less it. Yeah, and sort of leaving us there to float away. But in fact, I'm sure that there are bigger things due. Over the years, we have had many hints and instances letting us know that once we're in place in this new foundation headquarters in Antikythera, that there will be the most fantastic phenomena developed there that will beat anything that happened at Scole, but which will prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that life goes on after death.
Visitors were reporting that the Scole hole was alive with extraordinary phenomena. According to the Scole group, their spirit communicators requested that they place this empty glass dome on their table.
The glass dome was very important to the Scole work. Creative energy stored in the dome and was used by the spirit team to produce the phenomena that happened at Scole.
In this remarkable photograph, the energy can actually be seen radiating out from the dome. But since these phenomena are so unusual, the group knew that without careful independent scrutiny, their experiments would be dismissed as fake. One of the leading researchers into Scole was veteran SPR member Montague Keane.
Initially, we were all pretty sceptical because what had been claimed seemed so way out.
Another key researcher was Dr. Arthur Ellison, an emeritus professor of electrical engineering and a former president of the SPR.
No scientist of any kind would ever say that anything could not possibly happen.
The third principal investigator was research psychologist Dr. David Fontana. Professor Fontana is one of the world's most respected paranormal investigators.
Paranormal is that mysterious area behind the seen and the known world. And since most of the world is unseen and unknown, and most of the world is full of mystery, for me it's a fascinating and absorbing area.
To preclude the possibility of fraud, these scientists were allowed to inspect the cellar and all its contents before and after sessions. All participants had to empty their pockets and leave their belongings outside. The cellar had only one entrance, and this door was kept locked during all sessions. Despite these precautions, the incredible events at Scole continued unabated, and the SPR investigators reported what they saw in graphic terms.
We saw coloured lights, we saw materializations, we had direct voices, that is, spirit voices talking from the air. We were touched by the spirits. We saw a whole range of phenomena which could not be mistaken by 3 investigators such as ourselves.
In the spirit of openness, the Scole group allowed more investigators to scrutinize their sessions. These included leading scientists from several disciplines, even a professional magician. One of the scientists was the internationally renowned biologist and author, Dr. Rupert Sheldrake.
Science has done very little to investigate the afterlife or reincarnation. Most materialists assume that both of them are impossible. So there's a kind of dogmatic denial by some scientists of the possibility of these things. But I wouldn't say that was a scientific understanding. I would say that was a dogmatic ideologically motivated dismissal. The only way to have a scientific understanding is to do the research.
We had a number of different professors of different disciplines to come, and sometimes they could test their expertise against the expertise on the other side. For example, Professor Archie Roy, who's an astronomer and specialises in the movement of celestial bodies, had a discussion with the other side about celestial mechanics. And he said afterwards that he thought there were only about half a dozen people in the country who would know exactly what they were talking about.
Such evidence is gold dust to researchers, as it is unlikely to have been fabricated by the mediums who possess no academic training in this area. Although the scientists found this sort of evidence impressive, they still needed to eliminate any possibility of fraud taking place under the cover of darkness. Therefore, the Scole Group devised several controls to help eliminate this possibility. One of these controls involved all participants wearing luminous wristbands. These bands were attached with Velcro, so they could not be removed without attracting attention. They also requested the use of night vision equipment.
We persistently asked them to accept infrared cameras, and they said not yet. It would interfere with the energy in some way. So we had to accept this with great reluctance.
We were told that this phenomena could be developed in the light, but if it were, it would take an awfully long time to produce, years and years, rather than a few months that it actually took us.
Critics saw this insistence on darkness as an excuse to hide fraud, but participants to the Scole experiment were not always in total darkness.
Whoa, look at you!
There were various shapes, generally like a pea-sized light, and it had substance. They would come and sit on your hand, you could feel them.
They were intelligently directed and intelligently moving, and would be responsive to our wishes, whether expressed or silent.
The gyrations were sometimes so rapid that it almost left like a circle of light going over here and over there. Sometimes two lights would appear and just stare at me within inches of my eyes.
I thought at first that the lights must be small light-emitting diodes suspended on the end of nylon fishing line.
Then suddenly a light would start to do a tap dance on the table, bouncing up and down on the table, and you could hear it click as it rebounded from the table, and suddenly
it went pop, went through the table and came out the other side. Now, no nylon fishing line explanation would account for it going through an apparently solid, well, it was a solid object, a table.
The lights also had another rather strange trick up their sleeve, if I may talk about lights as having sleeves, and that was to pass through bodies.
I was actually used as a guinea pig in the early days to see how it felt and to develop the phenomena. And this light would actually enter through my chest, and then 3 minutes later it would probably pop out of the arm or something and disappear across the room. This was being developed to produce a healing phenomena.
I have this bad knee, and at one point we had a light that was moving around the room and rested on my knee for a minute and suddenly moved inside my knee.
Yeah, she just went into my bad knee.
I could feel it moving around on my knee, and then all of a sudden shot out the back of my leg and took off. The pain was greatly reduced, and the swelling that had been in it that day was gone, and that was a huge, wonderful thing to happen.
Now, I just wanted to touch on the spirit boxes. Have you ever used one?
Yeah, the TDC. We always called it the TDC device, trans-dimensional communication device.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have called their different things spirit boxes or what have you.
ITC.
But the TDC was the one thing that was given to us on blueprint on an unopened film by Edison himself. And we built it just as he had put on the blueprint, and it took a long time to actually start to work. But once it did work, we had actual communication, vocal communication with the spirit world and with other dimensions through this one little device.
And you heard
it
them?
really took about 18 months to get the results very, very good at a top standard. But the very first person to talk to us through that TDC device was Edison himself, and he spoke to us for 15 minutes. We've still got the somewhere we've still got the communication that he gave us.
Wow, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite
Did
amazing.
you manage to get any apports to show us?
Well, there are apports at the moment, but it's very difficult where I work. I have a space to work on that's about 1 square foot here,
Oh.
and there's not much really that we can show you immediately. But having said that, if we do a third version of this, then perhaps I can at least show you the actual device itself and a few of the apports that we got.
That would be fantastic.
Back at Scole, visitors reported seeing and especially hearing these objects materialize from out of nowhere. In the language of physical mediumship, these objects are called apports.
An apport is an object which is quite solid, which is brought from one location to another during an experimental session, but in so doing apparently passes through solid walls, doors, etc. Well, the total number of apports that we had during the experimental sessions was about 80 or even more.
Whilst we were sitting here, this object would arrive, just materialise, and arrive on the table. But as it arrived, that's the sort of noise it would make.
Despite the fact that witnesses heard a loud bang every time an apport arrived, no matter how small, skeptics have dismissed this phenomenon as objects merely thrown into the air. But the appearance of these apports are not so easy to explain away. These newspapers arrived in pristine condition, despite having originated in the 1940s. But who might have sent it to the Scole Group, and why? The answer arrived, they say, when dead British medium Helen Duncan spoke to them via one of the mediums. During World War II, Duncan's life was ruined when she was arrested and imprisoned for practicing mediumship. As she described her ordeal to the group, this newspaper allegedly appeared out of nowhere. To their astonishment, displayed prominently on its front page was the story of Duncan's trial and conviction.
I think she suffered greatly through her mediumship, and she was really coming to wish us well, and she bought the newspaper as a sign of a very turbulent time in her life.
The scientists knew that an old newspaper could easily be copied and printed onto modern paper, so Montague Keane had the suspect newspaper analysed.
We took it to the leading research station in England, indeed in the world, on paper and printing, and it was absolutely clear from their report that first of all it was done on letterpress, which has gone out of existence virtually since the early 1970s, I would say. It was newsprint produced during wartime, which lacked certain chemicals which you couldn't get hold of. So this was a genuine article which appeared 50 years after the event, but no one has been able to explain how it got there.
So where did all these apported objects come from?
We were told by the spirit team that they were never stolen, but were basically objects that had been lost or discarded, or at one time been owned by the spirit personality that brought them for us.
I've got here Alan and Diana Bennett. They show remarkable ability in communicating with the deceased. Did you ever secretly test them?
No, we didn't need to, because we sat with them for 1,000 hours and nobody in that room was cheating. We would have known immediately if anybody did. It wasn't necessary. They were 100% genuine. We knew that from the beginning. And it was several months before we started to get good communications. So no, it wasn't necessary. And there was no money changing hands. So they had nothing to gain by cheating in any way, shape or form.
And
so
I
they were
believe
100% genuine.
They continued conversations over like a course of like different personalities, continued conversations in different sessions that, you know, like happened?
Yeah, well, they did. I mean, they were both deep trance mediums. They were both out for the count from the moment that, well, not probably from the moment they sat down, but certainly within 5 to 10 minutes of being in the room, they were both deeply asleep or deeply in trance, and various communicators spoke through them. I mean, in the case of Diana, we had probably the most wonderful communicator of the lot, who was a lady called Emily Bradshaw. She called herself, that wasn't her correct name. She was a real Victorian lady, and I think she came from very much from the upper classes. But Emily was the most fantastic woman for bringing evidence of survival to each and every one of us. And she spoke through Diana on a regular basis.
Emily, when did you live on the earth?
Oh, a long time ago now.
19th century?
Yes. It's the love that connects people.
Right.
And the rest doesn't matter a jot.
So when they went into trance, how long did it take them actually to get to trance state?
About 10 minutes, no more. Well, and also the thing was that they were in trance for the whole sitting. So if the sitting lasted 3 hours, they were in trance for basically 3 hours.
Wow. And you've got recordings of this?
We've got recordings of every one of the sessions, yes.
Oh, that would be amazing. You've got to share these.
Well, these are something that might be shared once we've actually got the centre, which will operate as the centre of physical mediumship in the world, and where it's going to be very much a scientific based place, in that much of the research will be done in a scientific way, and for genuine students and people who are really researching properly, they will have access to some of this information and to some of these recordings.
And don't forget, I'm going to have that link, like I did before, where people can put their donation of €20, and that is an annual deposit. I mean, you can give more if you want.
Some people donate more than that, but that's all that we ask is €20 to belong to the foundation.
Yeah.
And if you belong to the foundation, you actually got immediate access to personal advice. If you need personal advice, I will only do that with people who belong to the foundation. I haven't got enough time in this world to do it for people that don't. But if people make the effort to join the foundation, then I'm personally open and happy to help, with any information they need on physical mediumship.
Once again, I can't thank you enough for being a part of tonight, giving your time to share your knowledge and wonderful experiences. And we definitely have to do number 3, because we haven't finished the 32 questions. Okay. So I've got it marked. I'm actually up to about number 19. So, so you're doing extremely well, and I absolutely, as I said before, I could listen to you forever. You're a wealth of knowledge and just sharing these experiences, and I would absolutely be so honoured if you could, have a look and see if you can get, a bit of a recording or something, to play from Edison, or even
that's something that I've just had a rap on my right next door to me here on this chest I've got next to me. That spirit telling me I'm not allowed to share those communications at this point. Okay. But certainly for people that are serious members of the foundation and who are able eventually to visit us, to visit the centre and to be a part of the work that we do there, then for serious students, etc., there will be a time in the future when you can access some of these.
Oh, that would be absolutely wonderful. And I do respect Spirit's wishes. So once again, I thank you, Robin, for your time.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah. We will catch up again.
Yeah, and we just reiterate, sort of, if people do want to join, it's €20 a year to be sent through PayPal to the PayPal or to the email address Torcalero, Torcalo, Torcalero 25 at yahoo.co.uk. And for anyone that wants a copy of the basic guide, also, please, that's €10. If you put that through the same PayPal account, then the PDF of the basic guide will be sent on to you.
Wonderful.
Obviously,
and don't forget to put like a little note to say that that is also for the basic guide.
Yeah, so, absolutely. So, but if anybody that does join, please give us your email address so you can have some of our newsletters and be kept up to date with everything. Let us know which country you live in, and we need your name. That's all, and we can take it all from there.
All right. Well, thank you, Robin. You have a wonderful week, and we'll arrange that next appointment.
Okay.
Yeah. You'll send me the bill.
Well, I'm always happy. If anyone wants to donate a few euros, it helps very much. We have to sort of get that money through so we can buy that property. It's been sitting there unloved now for 4 years. We need to get in there and get it working.
Yep, and we're going to do it. It's going to happen. Yeah. We've got to be positive and focus all the positive energy towards that. But I will let you go to see your lovely Sandra. And hugs again to both of you. Thank you once more. And thank you, Spirit, for being a part of tonight or today where you are. Night time here. And you have a lovely week ahead. And
we'll connect again in the very near future.
Absolutely. Take care.
Right. Cheers. Bye-bye. Now. Bye.
And that concludes part 2 of my interview with Robin Foy, founder of the Scole Experiment and author of In Pursuit of Physical Mediumship and Witnessing the Impossible. And if you'd like to be a member of the Spiritual Science Foundation, it's only €20 every year. Send your payment along with your full name, email and postal address via PayPal to Torcalero25 at yahoo.co.uk. And don't forget, if you want the copy of the basic guide, it's a PDF format. It's only €10. And don't forget to mention that is actually for the basic guide. And if you've enjoyed these series, please remember to hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. Bye for now, stay safe, and see you next time.